The age-old debate of meat-based versus plant-based protein. Which one is better for a variety of things, for muscle building, for general health? What is the deal with these two categories of protein? Some people say, who promote a vegetarian and vegan lifestyle, that plant-based protein is better. Others who follow a carnivore-based diet say meat-based is better. What are you, as a consumer, supposed to choose and supposed to sort of believe in a way? You're having these two conflicting arguments and two conflicting beliefs. Which one is true? Which one are you going to follow, and which one are you going to continue to use as your diet for the rest of your life, as the sort of your dietary marker? This is one of those things where it's hard to have been swayed by one side or the other. Meat is the thing that's generally considered to be quite protein rich, but plants are quite nutrient rich. That's generally how it's been seen. But now plant-based protein has been sort of coming out into the limelight. Is that because it's better, or is that because there's a bit of a whole propaganda sort of thing going on with the general vegan and vegetarian lifestyle, which does have its benefits, but is the protein that you can get from plants one of them? As I started writing my script for this video, I was not sure on which was actually objectively better for things like muscle building and general health. I just wasn't sure, and there was no way for me to know, so I did some research. So I looked at the differences between white meat and red meat, and unprocessed and processed meat. So in this video, I'm generally only going to consider unprocessed vegetables and unprocessed meat. No sausages, no burgers or any bullshit like that, just the raw steaks and the raw chicken breasts, the unprocessed meats. And the same with veg. I'll probably only on a baseline level consider things such as corn and any veggie burgers or stuff like that is plant-based. I'm not going to consider that because it's just essentially just a bunch of processed plant junk, which isn't really necessarily good for you. It just has all that processed stuff, which I personally believe anything that's too highly processed cannot be good for you in one way or another. I just think that it's best to stay away from those things no matter what, even if there are some kind of benefits. But processed versus unprocessed meat. Unprocessed meat wins easily. And I've talked about this a lot. I feel like one of the reasons that a lot of statistics generally say that meat has been shown to show high rates of cardiovascular disease and plants don't show this general trend is because it just considers meat. It doesn't consider unprocessed meat. It considers the steak burgers and the sausages, which all contain a good few chemicals, a good few emulsifiers, a good few things like that, additives, etc. Unprocessed meat, I genuinely don't think has this kind of bigger issue surrounding it as I think processed meat does. Processed meat is something that I stay away from, even though try to stay away from. Processed meat is something that I try to stay away from, even though I am a meat eater, and I would much prefer it and consider it a lot healthier to eat a steak compared to a burger patty, for instance. Now, in terms of red meat versus white meat, in terms of which kind of category of meat you're going for, what out of red meat and white meat has the better kind of protein in it? Now, white meat has more bioavailable protein, meaning that your body is able to absorb more of it than the kind of protein you get from red meat from similar sort of masses of meat. If you had 100 grams of chicken and 100 grams of beef and you ate both of them, you'd get more protein as a percentage of the total protein that was in there to begin with white meat than you would with red meat. But in terms of the protein to begin with as well, chicken breast has more protein per 100 grams of chicken breast than red meat does per 100 grams of beef loin or something like that. Per bit of beef, there is less protein than in a chicken breast. So chicken breast and white meat in general has more protein in it per 100 grams, and that protein as a percentage of what was in there at the start of the chicken breast, when you eat that chicken breast, 80% of the protein is absorbed into the body because that's what is bioavailable. So you're essentially getting a double benefit with chicken breast and white meat here, for instance. So white meat takes the cake on the differences between the protein in red meat and white meat. And there are also a couple of things at the end of the video which we'll talk about which do make a sort of health-based difference. The kind of proteins that you get in red meat and white meat are going to be very similar and do different things. They're going to cause very, very similar sorts of muscle growth. But there is one thing about red meat which is very different to white meat, which is actually the thing that generally differentiates the two things, the red meat versus the white meat. The two colours are actually differentiated by a certain protein, which I'm going to talk about later on in the video. But the actual things the proteins do mostly are constant. So that's why I've not explained the amount of muscle that red meat or versus white meat builds, because it's the same kind of protein. Obviously, if you're absorbing more from chicken and you're getting more from chicken, that is the benefit. That is the advantage over red meat. So that's why I'm sort of talking about this debate. Now, the age-old debate of plant-based versus meat-based protein, we finally got to that sort of stage. Now, animal-based protein has been shown to be better at building muscle than plant-based protein. That is a fact. The NIH did experiments on this topic, and they found that meat-based protein built more lean muscle mass than plant-based protein did. And this was in a comparison between ages and untrained or trained males and females and stuff like that. They were given maybe it's whey protein versus soy protein, or like meat protein, like beef protein versus, I don't know, some kind of bean paste or something like that. It was all in a comparison between some different categories involving different kinds of proteins. That was essentially how this experiment and these studies, and that's how these things are generally conducted. And in this one particular experiment, 1.25 lean kilograms of muscle mass overall was built on people who had meat-based protein added inside of their diet, compared to the 0.8 kilograms of the people that had plant-based protein added to their diet. So meat-based protein is building more muscle than plant-based protein is. Even the little things like knee flexion, for instance, in older people, as your bones and your joints start to deteriorate, knee flexion and sort of flexibility of joints was actually increased with meat-based protein compared to plant-based protein. Meat-based protein was more effective at increasing your knee flexibility, for instance, than plant-based protein, which I found quite interesting. Now, in this experiment, plant-based protein did have some slight advantages. In fact, the people who had plant-based protein actually had a higher bench press increase, higher kilograms increase in bench press compared to when they started off on this experiment, compared to people who had meat-based protein. Squats and bench was pretty similar, but I think plant-based just edged it out by like a 0.01 kg or something like that. It was very, very tight. It was basically the same. But I found that quite interesting because these are all sort of exercises you'd expect the results to be quite similar, but in fact it was totally different between all three of these strength exercises. Now, the averages of these figures, the 1.25 and the 0.8, for instance, these are all medians. So these are the middle, this is the middle group. This is if you lined everyone up who was on the meat-based protein, how much muscle mass did they gain from being on this experiment? The middle guy was 1.25. Do the same with plant-based protein, the middle guy was 0.8. So for the majority of people, meat-based protein works best. I genuinely have a belief that different kinds of diets will work best for different kinds of people. I think that there are people out there where a plant protein-based diet would actually work better in some scenarios for them. But I think for meat-based protein, because that's how we've evolutionary and ancestrally been developed as human beings, as a Homo sapien species, meat-based protein is going to work better for a lot more people. Now, for these heavyweight exercises that I was talking about earlier, the medians, while were quite sort of spread out, like meat-based had quite an advantage in deadlifts and plant-based had quite an advantage in bench press. If you looked at the ranges of the very end person, the very lowest bench press increase and the very highest bench press increase, the ranges were actually quite similar. It's just the middle person. There were a lot of people in that gap who had a bench press increase between those two figures, and the range was a lot bigger between this side of the median than that side, essentially. I probably explained that quite badly, but I will put the links that I was using, the statistics that I was using, in the description so you can check that out. Now, this, I guess, is only one study, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I've always believed that for me, personally, that a meat-based diet would be better. My blood type is O, that means I'm ancestrally derived from quite tribal backgrounds, and I would have quite often fed off of meat. That's not to say that I should go on a complete carnivore diet and eliminate all vegetables. I don't think that's what would be necessary for me. I don't think that's what would be best for me. Fruit and veg has a place in our diet, but I think where you get protein from, I'm limiting this to just protein. I'm not going to go on a meat versus veg straight up health debate because I think both have their benefits. That'd be stupid of me. But in terms of protein, I'm going to try get my protein from meat rather than veg. And I suppose when it comes to health, building more muscle from your diet is a big health factor. Muscles in general are quite a big, and I suppose underrated health factor, with the way that society may see like people that go to the gym and there's like big muscle stuff, and it's not necessarily actually seen as healthy to have really massive muscles. And I can understand that there's a bit of a stigma surrounding that, but having more muscles that are able to actually function and mean that your bones and your joints are able to move, like I mentioned with like the joint flexibility and flexion earlier, these muscles that are inside of the knee have a huge part to play in your flexibility and ability to move around with ease and without pain on a daily basis. So muscles are quite an important part of health and life, and so I think that is a good and important factor to consider when thinking about your health. Now, as I was mentioning before with the red versus white meat debate, the reason that red meat is red is because of a protein known as myoglobin, which is somewhat related to hemoglobin, which is the kind of globin and the kind of iron containing and passing around chemical, or the iron containing chemical that binds to oxygen. Hemoglobin is the one found in humans. Myoglobin is the one found in red meat containing animals such as cows. Now, myoglobin is the protein that is said to be the thing that means that red meat could potentially be carcinogenic and cause cancer and some cardiovascular disease, because I've talked about how saturated fats aren't actually that bad for you at all, and in fact they can have some dietary benefits, which would be probably completely, if you're watching this video as a kind of diet video for the first time, it's going to be completely like a big shock to you. But if you watch some of my videos that I've made on that, it will all make sense. But myoglobin is the main thing that I don't actually know about for red meat. I haven't done any research on myoglobin, and I'm definitely going to in the future, and I will make a video on it discussing if it really is a cancer-causing like protein and if it is something to be worried about at all. But white meat is something that I'm definitely going to consider to be the healthiest way to get my protein, as I'm sure that many people do, but I just wanted to make that a clear and understood statement. With that, I recommend subscribing for more content like this, and have a good day.